everybody, it is Red right back with you to review the latest pro wrestling news and results at Pro Wrestling. Yeah. Let's get into it. It's another one of those WrestleMania retrospectives on the way. We got 3 in a row here, Wrestling Rants, that we're going to be popping off before WrestleMania week officially kind of kicks off. It is technically WrestleMania week, but the real stuff will be kicking off around Thursday. So we're going to be dropping this rant on WrestleMania 12. We also are going to be having a WrestleMania 16, aka WrestleMania 2000 rant, coming up later on this evening. And then probably into tomorrow, we will cap it all off with the final rant in the Rantrospective Southern California series. There's 5 of them. That will be WrestleMania 21 with my own personal live event perspective from that show. That was the second WrestleMania I've been to live. My first one was 19 in Seattle. And I will be throwing on a lot of thoughts on everything from the Los Angeles WrestleMania 21 event, as well as Raw the previous day after WrestleMania that year in Los Angeles. I was front row ringside, right in front of the camera at Monday Night Raw, so I'll talk about my experience with that as well and how I ended up getting such a damn good ticket. I still, looking back, can't believe I got such an awesome ticket out of that Raw show the day after WrestleMania 21. Wow. All right, well, we are here to talk about WrestleMania 12, Anaheim Pond, Anaheim, California. As you can see, I got the WrestleMania 6 t-shirt on, but we're going to double up, head on to 12. This was the 3rd WrestleMania in Southern California, Los Angeles greater area. Of course, like I said, Anaheim, California was the location. The Anaheim Pond, this was the first of 2 WrestleManias that this location had. This is also the location, of course, is WrestleMania 16, aka WrestleMania 2000. March 31st, 1996 was the date on this one. Attendance at the pond, 18,853. This was the legitimate attendance from what I can understand. Cannot find any information on what WWE counted on this one, but this may have been one of those WrestleManias where they really didn't feel the need to do that. That kind of stuff only happened once they hit the Stadium Series WrestleMania runs, like 17 onward. Then you start having inflated attendance figures of a drastic proportion here and there and everywhere. Buy rate wise, 1.2 buy rate at the time. This equated to, at the time, about 290,000 buys. 290,000 buys. Did I just say 290 buys? A lot more than that. I think in time there added to be a little bit more to it. But 1.2 is what it finally came down to for North America or the United States as far as buy rates go. And just for reference, this was lower than the buy rate for WrestleMania 10, the buy rate for WrestleMania 11, but it was better than the buy rate for WrestleMania 13, which kind of bottomed out, I think, at about 230,000 buys for WrestleMania 13. So this is a little bit better, but the trend, you can see from WrestleMania 10 to WrestleMania 13 was definitely downward, picked back up at 14, and then actually started building from that point on. Just some facts coming down on this one from various sources online. This was the only WrestleMania with only one single title defended on the entire card. That was the WWE World Championship. Literally no other titles were defended on this WrestleMania. This also, I think, holds the distinction for the WrestleMania with the lowest number of matches on the card, at a total of 6 for the pay-per-view. You could even call it 5 because the Roddy Piper Goldust match was kind of more an angle or an unsanctioned fight than a match itself. And then you had 2 on the paper. Well, you had technically 1 on the pre-show. You technically had 2, but really only 1. We'll talk about that in a second. So this all around, I think, holds the distinction for the lowest number of matches at a WrestleMania event total. Also, this is the first WrestleMania out of the first 12 where there was no, and I mean no, celebrity involvement aside from a celebrity softball game charity thing that they did where it was Hollywood celebrities and personalities against WWF wrestlers and personalities. That is really the long and short of celebrity involvement for this WrestleMania. There literally was nobody on screen at WrestleMania, nobody interviewing in the back, nothing for celebrities on this one. A few other notes from matches maybe that were going to happen, that were planned, that kind of changed up. Vader and Yokozuna was supposed to be a one-on-one match for WrestleMania 12. Because of a few factors, it got changed to a six-man. One factor is Yokozuna. He was getting up there and he was not able to really work many one-on-one big matches. We saw a few attempts at that later on at different pay-per-view iterations throughout the rest of 96. I think Yokozuna did, in fact, work a match against Vader a few months later on maybe Beware a Dog in Your House, I think. I can't recall if that's for sure, but I remember there was some attempt. It was a very quick match. So that was one reason why this singles match didn't happen in Mania. The other reason being Vader was actually still harboring a shoulder injury that he got surgery on that wrote him out of wrestling for a little while. If you recall, there was an angle with Gorilla Monsoon where he attacked Gorilla Monsoon that led to Roddy Piper actually coming in to be the president of WWF at the time. And that was a write-off for Vader because of his injury. So Vader was brought back early because they were, well, I mean, ultimately at this point, the roster in WWF was pretty weak. And they really didn't have a lot of star power, and they really needed Vader on this card. So that was what we got out of it, was a six-man that ended up opening WrestleMania 12, the main pay-per-view. Let's talk about some notes about the Piper and Goldust Backlot Brawl, Hollywood Backlot Brawl. There was a few iterations of this before we got to where we were at with it. The first iteration was that this match was actually going to be a Miami street fight between Goldust and Scott Hall, Razor Ramon. This was supposed to be a pre-tape that would theoretically be from Miami via satellite. So it would have been a kind of a cinematic match, I guess, before all the cinematic matches happened during COVID. So it's kind of the first example of it. And it did become certainly a cinematic match by the end of it, or at least a part of one, Piper and Goldust. So that was the first iteration of this idea. Goldust, Razor Ramon. You can see that in the storylines too. There was a lot of this program being developed. They had the match at Royal Rumble. Obviously, they were going to rematch it at Mania. I would guess Ramon was probably going to beat Goldust in the Miami Street fight originally. I'm just speculating on that. But then things changed. Scott Hall, Razor Ramon gave his notice in February, late February. There was a drug test failure as well around that time. Suspension happened. That took Scott Hall off the show. You saw Kevin Nash was still involved in this match, as Diesel against Undertaker, as that was another really long-term program that they were banking on for WrestleMania. They were definitely wanting to pay it off at WrestleMania 2. So that might explain why Nash stuck around. He really didn't miss many dates after giving his notice on approximately, I think it was March 5th. So that was about a little less than a month, before WrestleMania even happened. So they stuck to their guns with Kevin Nash. He did the job against Undertaker. We'll talk about it in a moment, but kind of a clunky match looking back at it. I hadn't seen it for a while. So that kind of explains the dynamic there. There was a drug test. I think there was a lot more heat on Scott Hall at the time. He was off WrestleMania, changed plans. They kept Nash in there despite Nash also giving notice in about 2 weeks after Scott Hall did approximately. But there was just, I guess, a better camaraderie with the fact that Kevin Nash was still able to work through a lot of the stuff after he gave notice on a professional level. Another then iteration of this backlot brawl occurred around the same time. There was all this scuttlebutt with Scott Hall being pulled from the Goldust thing. There also was a plan at one point of Roddy Piper against, according to Bruce Pritchard, Roddy Piper against O.J. Simpson. Legit. Plans fell through, obviously. This was supposed to be a match that would kind of showcase, I guess, like a comeuppance against O.J. Simpson, because he was, obviously the verdict was such where he was not guilty for the murder of those people. And I guess the idea was Piper was supposed to be the bastion savior of, everybody that thought OJ was guilty or something. But ultimately, this didn't come to be. What we ended up getting, of course, was Piper and Goldust in this backlot brawl, which a lot of interesting details we'll talk about during the match breakdown on this one. That's really about it. Oh, a few other things. Regarding the Ultimate Warrior's return to WrestleMania 12 here, after a multi-year absence, I think it was about 5 years, one of the main juggernauts that advocated for his return and became like kind of an intermediary in discussions and talks was Linda McMahon, who I guess has always been having a sweet spot for the Ultimate Warrior on some level. So she was the kind of the advocate to get him back in the company. This WrestleMania, Vince was looking for a big return, and this is where they went with Ultimate Warrior. There was a lot of backstage politics involving that Ultimate Warrior match with Triple H. Originally, there was some conjecture. Gerald Briscoe even stepped in to try to be an advocate for Hunter about Ultimate Warrior no selling the pedigree. They wanted that out of the match. Warrior wasn't feeling it. There also was a thought going into this match that it was originally scheduled to be a little more competitive. That got changed, presumably by the Warriors' demands at the time, I think. So, all in all, just a real big mess of this match. This was originally supposed to be much more competitive. Ultimate Warrior was being lobbied to not kick out of the pedigree. There was officials that did not want that as part of the match because it effectively killed, or there was a fear that it would kill Triple H's pedigree finish if that ended up happening. And it ended up happening. I guess the finish didn't get completely killed, but definitely looking back, that match should have went much differently. It was kind of a travesty of justice all around. One other note before we get into the results. I went on YouTube to do some searching and digging on information on WrestleMania 12. Do yourself a favor if you want an interesting, nostalgic look back at something. Search on YouTube for WrestleMania 12, maybe behind the scenes or things like that in a search. You're going to find a fan camcorder video of about 30 to 45 minutes of footage where they were just fans at the weekend at the Wrestlers Hotel at Marriott. Things were so much different back in this period than they would be even, I would say, 3 or 4 years after this, or maybe even a couple of years after this. There wasn't this lockdown at the hotel. The wrestlers were engaging freely with all the fans at the hotel. People were just hanging out in the lobby for the wrestlers. I don't think that is so much of a thing in current day for sure. And even back 10, 15 years back, when WWE started really taking off in the Attitude Era, I think things changed and never went different from there. There was a lot more fan interaction, wasn't as intimate, should we say, as it was in this case, when you could literally stay at the same hotel the wrestlers stayed at and engage in meet and greets. They had a brunch type of thing, brunch breakfast, where they were doing a Q&A. They were showing that, footage of that, autographs aplenty during the time at the hotel. They also showed footage from the softball game at a football stadium. Wasn't really aware of that until then. So a lot of interesting footage if you want to go on YouTube and check that out if you want to get a little nostalgic about WrestleMania 12. So let's get into everything about the show. Kicking off was a half-hour countdown show called the Free-For-All. I believe it was only a half hour. It may have been an hour. So it was on many different platforms. TV Guide channel, I remember we always have it. Up on the little corner of the screen when the guide and all the different stuff programming on the channels would go through. Other pay-per-view outlets had it as an entire whole. I remember getting this on DirecTV, and they actually aired the entire Free-For-All front to back with, didn't have to be on a runner channel, they used to call it. The Free-For-All was certainly different this time around at WrestleMania 12. We had one match in the ring, and that was the finals of the tag title tournament at the time. And the Body Donnas went over the Godwins. I remember this. Sunny got on the ring apron and was kind of flashing her assets at the Godwins, distracted the Godwins, and the Body Donnas won to get those tag titles. So technically, if you want to get technical, there was 2 title matches on this WrestleMania. It was just the first one was finals of a vacant title that wasn't technically on the pay-per-view, it was on the Countdown show. So I think that is why WrestleMania 12 still gets the distinction of only having 1 title truly defended at the show, because this was like the finals of a tournament too, so a little bit different. The other match, and one quick note back on that Body Donna's Godwins, 5 minutes 22 seconds. I looked back at it and I gave it like 1.5 stars, maybe 2 stars. It was pretty weak overall. Then the other match on the free-for-all is definitely interesting looking back at this one. This was all the grand finale of the Billionaire Ted Wrestling War Room skits and segments that were like long in the tooth that they were doing for, like 3 or 4 months here at this point. Vince wouldn't let it go. Bruce Pritchard was quoted, I saw some part of a podcast where he was talking about this, mostly everybody in the company just wanted to be done and over with this stuff involving the Huckster, the Scheme Gene, Billionaire Ted, Nacho Man, all these knocks at WCW. There was so much bad juju between WCW and WWF at the time here. If you recall, soon after these Billionaire Ted skits was when the NWO came around, and then WWE crying foul that they kind of got, I guess, almost played by WCW, where they were mocking and playing off of those Billionaire Ted skits, that the WWE thought they were being so smart on against their war against WCW, like going on the attack a bit against WCW. So this match was more of a pre-tape that was done, according to Bruce Pritchard, in a studio at WWF headquarters with WWF staff as people in the stands. They had the Huckster, which was a super old skinny dude, coming out in moving slow motion to the point of they fast forwarded the footage. So this was super tongue-in-cheek. It wasn't very funny looking back, but it was interesting to see how they were parodying things here. The Nacho Man, obviously, enough said there. Scheme Gene was the ring announcer. Billionaire Ted was the referee. There was tons of knocks and goofs in this whole thing. This was a mess and a half. I can't even really call this a match. This was more of a segment. There was a no contest when they all basically passed out from exhaustion. Billionaire Ted saw an FCC guy wearing a hood, like all black and a hood, saying FCC or FTC, and passed out and freaked out at that notion. It was just low rent, low taste. This was just, looking back, pretty weak. They did a Mystery Science 3000 kind of take on this as well, where they had Shadows of King Lawler and Vince McMahon doing the commentating over this as well. This was just really, really, really weird. So that was the free-for-all before WrestleMania 12. Now we get into the main card, match 1, kicking off the show. Vader, Owen Hart, the British Bulldog over Ahmed Johnson, Jake the Snake Roberts, and Yokozuna in about 13 minutes, about 3 1/4 star match. I will say just about everybody in this match was ready to go. Ahmed Johnson was flying all over the place. Yokozuna was trying his best on a big platform. Vader as well, despite the injury he was still dealing with, performed pretty strong. Owen Hart, of course, carried a significant amount of this match. Jake Roberts looked okay in there. The gimmick here was if Yoko's team won, Cornette would get 5 minutes in the ring with Yokozuna to finally play off of that storyline. As it were, the babyfaces did not win here. Vader beat Jake Roberts after a Vader splash, after some interference with Cornette, tennis racket, etc. involved in this match. 13:08 on the time, 3 1/4 star, on the opener. I thought it was all right for what it was. Another thing to note, looking back, it's kind of cool how they had the WrestleMania ring. So they had like this holographic kind of like thing going on with the ring mat, and I guess they were selling chunks of that mat on a premium level after the show. It was the first and the last time WWE ever did that. They must have not financially been fiscal. A lot of people just didn't give a shit enough to buy a piece of the ring at WrestleMania 12. Then here we go. This is the first part of the backlot. Rewind that again. Hollywood backlot brawl with Goldust and Roddy Piper. This was all pre-taped, according to some information I found online, somewhere between 3 weeks and a week before WrestleMania 12. They brought in Dustin, they brought in Roddy Piper, and they filmed this at Universal Studios backlot in Hollywood. So a little bit of piece of information for you on that. A lot of interesting parts of this portion of the backlot brawl. There's a lot of stuff online about lore behind this as well. Both guys wanted to make it look real. Dustin wanted Piper to give him some hardway blood since blading was banned in WWF at the time. So Piper unloaded into him with legit punches, he had a baseball bat he was not really pulling back too much on. There was a part where it clunked him in the head. There was another part where Piper, in a close-up shot, literally clocked hard Dustin Rhodes, Goldust. Dustin did get some hardway blood all over the place on his face and his noggin and his cranium. And Piper legitimately apparently broke his hand on that one punch they kind of showed a big close-up of during this pre-tape part of the backlot brawl. Also, Piper got kind of run over by Goldust, and this was partly a shoot a little bit. The word I got off of a What Culture video was that Piper would be willing to take the bump, so to speak, the stunt bump, to get run kind of head on by a car where Piper just jumped the hood essentially. But he did that as a favor to Vince McMahon for babysitting apparently his son at some point. This was off of a What Culture video. I'd never heard that one. So interesting little piece of information from this portion of two-parter essentially of this Hollywood backlot brawl. Things went as they went throughout the show. Everybody knows the history of showing the O.J. Simpson chase video snippets and things like that. Piper was in a white Bronco when he left the backlot in this part of the pre-tape. So a lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff playing, still knocking on O.J. Simpson a little bit in here, even though O.J. didn't make it to this show. But apparently, like I said, they were working hard to do that. So that's kind of breaks it down, at least to this portion of the backlot brawl. They break back away. They come back live to the pond. That match will certainly continue as the show progresses. Then we get to Stone Cold Steve Austin, as he was managed by Ted DiBiase. This was coming right off of the Ringmaster stuff, maybe a month or so before this. He's in there with Savio Vega. 10 minutes, 5 seconds of a 3-star match. I thought these two had a pretty solid program back in '96. This was kind of just the start of it. I think there was 1 or 2 other matches they did beyond this. During this match, Piper was on the phone, claiming to be on the run, chasing Goldust in the streets. And we got what we called aerial footage, and this is when they started showing archival news footage from the O.J. Simpson White Bronco chase. Just kind of a weird thing looking back how they did this. So we got to that match, Stone Cold over Savio Vega in 10 minutes. Like I said, about a 3-star match. I went for that. Then we get to the Ultimate Warrior and Triple H match. A minute 39 of a total squash. Looking back, I could barely even call this a 1-star match. It's just sad, the politics that went behind this one, as we talked about in the onset of this rant. Yeah, one thing to note, Sable, of course, was with Triple H. That was her debut as his kind of secondary in the match itself. Then afterwards, Todd Pettingill's with Mark Morrow, we called him. Todd Pettingill completely fucked that name up. The Wild Man Mark Morrow, or something along those lines. Triple H gets involved with Morrow in the back. Morrow basically saves Sable from Triple H's. I don't know what he was exactly going to do. He was pissed that he lost the match and wanted to take it out on Sable, I guess. So Morrow and Sable, who were a real-life couple at this time, kind of pair up to explain where Sable would be managing Mark Merrill at this point going into WWE. This was his debut. More aerial footage after this promo. The chase on the highway continues. I think they showed some footage on the street where the Bronco was like weaving in and out of traffic and stuff. It's crazy. We get to match 4, Undertaker over Diesel, Kevin Nash. I went 3 1/4 stars on this. That might be a little high. I don't know. It felt really clunky looking back. It felt like Nash was, on some levels, sandbagging a little bit on Taker, but I know there was mutual respect between these guys. But knowing Nash was on his way out, I think Nash just kind of really didn't give a fuck at this point. Although he did turn it up quite a bit in that match with Shawn Michaels. I think it was the next month at the next pay-per-view after WrestleMania 12. 16 minutes, 46 seconds. I thought this match could have maybe been cut a little bit and may have helped it just a little bit. Then we get into returning to the backlot brawl, only this is at the pond. Now this is the portion that I guess kind of becomes a match, although I didn't really see a referee in the ring, and I kind of get the vibe that this was never a match to begin with, because there never was a finish as well. Piper kind of technically went over Goldust, but there was no finish. Goldust kind of ran off after Piper stripped him down to lingerie. This is super awkward. Apparently, another news bit here, Dustin Rhodes went to Fredericks of Hollywood, bought some big woman's clothes, showed it to Vince, showed it to his wife at the time, Terry Runnels, and they loved it. They thought, go with it for the finish to get people going. And the people were going. Once Piper and Runnels got back into the ring, they drove into the arena and got back into the ring. The brawl ensued, and there was good heat for this. I would say the whole presentation, I'd give it about a 3.5 to 3/4, 3 3.25 stars for the entire presentation. I don't know if it was really a match, but it was certainly fucking entertaining. The first part, particularly the pre-tape at Universal Studios, I thought, damn, they really overachieved with that. Then we got the Ironman match to close it all off. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels wins the overtime. The total of match time was 1 hour and 1 minute and 56 seconds. So the overtime went a total of 1:56, if you're interested on that. Some notes for this. I did not know this until a video that I just recently saw, that Michaels and Bret Hart did not lay this match out at all until the day of the show at the arena. Basically, according to Hart, it took about 3 hours to put together. Shawn Michaels got 25 minutes of the first part of the match. Bret Hart then got a 30-minute chunk of the following part of the match after the first 25 minutes. Then that last 5 minutes of the 60 minutes was Shawn Michaels kind of laying that out. I did not know any of this. I found it very interesting. I also found it very interesting about the controversy after the finish, where Bret Hart refused to shake Michaels' hand. He claimed that that was something they agreed to beforehand to set up a match when Bret would return from taking a break. There was some contract issues, things of that nature. So Bret was trying to set that up with Michaels. Michaels took offense to that after the fact, apparently, or claimed he did in his book. There also was some conjecture with Michaels telling referee Earl Hebner to get that guy out of my ring, and this is my moment. So there was some heat over that as well. I don't know if that was because Shawn was pissed because Bret, in a work mode, refused to shake his hand. I don't know. It's just weird stuff going on here. There was a lot of heat within the company with the Click guys, and Bret Hart was having some issues with them. Certainly, he had some issues with Nash even in the previous month's match at In Your House. So, all in all, a lot of weird takes coming out of this one. And we saw, Bret basically left the company after this match as well. He did a couple weeks after in another international tour, and he left. So that was about it. And they had tried to set up this match, as we all know, for WrestleMania 13. And we all know what happened with Shawn Michaels kind of losing his smile so he doesn't have to job to Bret Hart the following year. But it all worked out, I thought, all right, because we wouldn't have gotten that Stone Cold Bret Hart match at WrestleMania if that was the case. All in all, I enjoyed WrestleMania 12 for the most part. Looking back at it, I would probably go maybe a B-. I don't think the Iron Man match necessarily holds up very well these days comparatively, looking back. So there's that to say. I went 4.25 stars looking back on that Ironman match this time around. All right, everybody, come on back. Later on, WrestleMania 16 Rantrospective, right here, wrestling. What's that?